picture this. A civilization so advanced it had indoor plumbing, a navy that practically owned two oceans, and a gleaming capital city built in these perfectly concentric rings of land and water. It was literally the jewel of the ancient world. Now, imagine that in a single day and night of total cataclysm, that entire empire just vanished, completely erased and swallowed by the ocean. Welcome to this explainer. Because before we dive into the wild discoveries that underwater archaeologists are making today, discoveries that are quietly rewriting our history books, we really need to understand why this dark mystery has haunted us for over 2,000 years.
Now, for most of the last 2 millennia, mainstream scholars have totally dismissed Atlantis. They've brushed it off as just a philosophical allegory, a nice little morality tale about the dangers of human hubris. But here's the thing. The guy who actually wrote the story, the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, he insisted not once, but twice in his writings that his account was absolute historical fact. And he didn't just give us some vague fairy tale myth. He wrote it almost like a surveyor's report. He gave us exact city dimensions, details on their canal irrigation grids, and even listed the highly specific building materials this lost empire used.
Okay, get this, because this is where it gets really interesting. Take a look at this one specific detail that scholars actually used to laugh at. Orichalcum. Plato described this as a real reddish-gold metal that was second in value only to gold, and he said the Atlanteans quarried it locally to literally sheathe their temple walls. For centuries, everyone thought this was pure fantasy, just made up. But the plot thickened in 2015 when marine archaeologists exploring a 2,600-year-old shipwreck off the coast of Sicily made a stunning discovery. Down in the wreck, they found 47 ingots of this highly unusual copper-zinc-lead alloy that perfectly, and I mean perfectly, matches Plato's description of orichalcum. So, Plato's legendary metal? It was very real, and someone in the ancient Atlantic world was actively trading it.
But, of course, there is a massive, glaring anomaly in Plato's account, and it's his timeline. The story was supposedly passed down from Egyptian priests to a Greek statesman named Solon, and they claimed Atlantis was destroyed 9,000 years before Solon's time. Well, do the math, and that places the destruction of Atlantis right at the tail end of the last ice age, around 9,600 BC. That is thousands of years before Athens was a thing, way before writing was even invented, and long before any supposedly advanced civilization existed on Earth.
So what are we supposed to make of all this? Was Atlantis actually a real place? Is it a distorted memory of a genuine ancient catastrophe, or have we just been looking in all the wrong places? Let's open up the case file. We're going to interrogate 5 very distinct locations that real historians, geologists, and marine archaeologists have seriously and sometimes very controversially proposed as the genuine site.
All right, let's start with suspect number 1, the volcanic catastrophe over in Santorini, Greece.
This first suspect is actually the most academically respectable theory. We're talking about the island of Thera, which you probably know today as Santorini. This was the home of the Minoans, basically Europe's first major civilization. They were incredible, they had sophisticated palaces and a massive advanced naval fleet. And tragically, they were wiped out by a colossal volcanic eruption around 1600 BC. The center of their island literally collapsed into a magma chamber, setting off these just devastating tsunamis. Now, the parallels to Atlantis are honestly striking. But the details kind of fall completely apart. The Minoans existed about 8,000 years after Plato's date. Plus, Plato explicitly stated Atlantis was out in the Atlantic Ocean beyond the Pillars of Hercules. The Minoans were stuck right inside the Mediterranean. Oh, and Plato specifically mentioned elephants roaming around Atlantis. Yeah, the Minoans definitely did not have elephants.
Which brings us to suspect number 2, anomalies in the shallow deep, off North Bimini in the Bahamas.
So, moving out into the actual Atlantic Ocean, in September 1968, some divers off the coast of North Bimini Island stumbled onto something wild. They found this massive, perfectly ordered formation of enormous limestone blocks sitting in about 18 feet of water. People quickly started calling this half-mile-long formation the Bimini Road. And eerily enough, this exact discovery was actually prophesied by the famous American psychic Edgar Cayce like 30 years before they found it. Now, to be clear, mainstream science confidently classifies these blocks as naturally fractured beach rock, but expeditions back in 2006 claim they found a second architectural layer of square-cut rocks buried underneath the main formation. So, as you can imagine, that keeps the debate fiercely alive today.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates why locations like the Bahamas matter so much to this mystery. At the end of the last ice age, when all those massive glaciers melted, global sea levels rose by roughly 120 meters. That is nearly 400 feet of water. Just to put that into perspective, the Bahamas platform, which is mostly shallow water today, was an enormous dry landmass the size of the UK back then. So the rising oceans essentially swallowed massive, potentially habitable coastal plains all over the world, exactly when Plato said Atlantis sank.
And this undeniable reality of rising post-Ice Age seas leads us perfectly into suspect number 3, the Black Sea flood.
So back in 1997, geologists from Columbia University uncovered evidence of a truly catastrophic flood that happened around 5,500 BC. Their research showed that the Black Sea actually used to be a much smaller freshwater lake. But as those global sea levels crept higher and higher, the Mediterranean finally and violently breached the natural dam of the Bosporus Strait. The water rushed in with 200 times the force of Niagara Falls. I mean, can you even imagine that? It instantly flooded up to 60,000 square miles of highly fertile, completely inhabited coastal land.
So you really have to wonder, could the intense generational trauma of a real historical flood like this have birthed the entire Atlantis myth? Famed oceanographer Robert Ballard, the same guy who discovered the wreck of the Titanic, actually took underwater submersibles down into the dead, oxygen-free depths of the Black Sea, and he found perfectly preserved ancient human shorelines and what looked like tool-worked timber structures. The ancient Varna civilization, who created the world's oldest known gold artifacts, was completely flooded out of this region. So a lot of researchers suggest that displaced survivors of this very real cataclysm became the true source of Plato's tale, just exaggerated over thousands of years.
All right, buckle up for suspect number 4, because this one is the ice continent itself, Antarctica. This theory is definitely our most extreme suspect. It proposes that an entire continent's history has been deliberately hidden beneath miles of solid ice. It was proposed by historian Charles Hapgood, and his highly controversial theory suggests the Earth's entire crust shifted as a single unit exactly 11,600 years ago. And guess what? That date perfectly matches Plato's timeline. Hapgood argued this shift flash froze what was a temperate, advanced civilization living on Antarctica. Now, we have to be objective here. Mainstream geologists heavily reject this idea, pointing out that deep ice core samples prove the continent has been frozen solid for at least 40,000 years.
But wait, hold on. Before we completely throw out Plato's crazy Ice Age timeline, we absolutely have to look at Turkey. The miraculous excavation of Göbekli Tepe completely shattered our entire understanding of human history. This site dates all the way back to 11,500 BC. It's the world's oldest monumental stone structure, and it proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that highly sophisticated, organized human construction really did exist right at the end of the Ice Age, exactly when Plato claimed Atlantis fell.
So, the timeline? Plausible. The human capability to build big things? It existed. But what if the date is right, the dimensions are right, but we have just been staring at the wrong map entirely? That thought brings us to a massive anomaly hidden in plain sight, deep in the scorching sands of northwestern Africa. Enter suspect number 5, the Eye of the Sahara, also known as the richest structure in Mauritania.
You can literally see this thing from space. In fact, early NASA astronauts used it as a visual navigation landmark. It's a 40-kilometer-wide geological bullseye. And if you compare Plato's exact checklist to this structure, the dimensional, geographic, and material matches seriously stretch the limits of coincidence. Plato described concentric rings of land and water. The Richat has alternating concentric rings of hard and soft rock. Plato said the city was about 23 kilometers wide. The inner ring here, roughly 23 kilometers. The building stones Plato mentioned, red, white, and black, the Richat is made of red sandstone, white quartzite, and black basalt. And crucially, it sits in Atlantic-facing Africa, exactly where Plato said it would be, beyond the Pillars of Hercules.
Now I know what you're thinking. Wasn't Atlantis supposed to be surrounded by water? Yes, and here's the kicker. 11,000 years ago, during a climatic period we call the Green Sahara, this region wasn't a desert at all. It was a lush, green savanna, with massive lakes and heavy river systems that could have easily connected the Richat structure directly to the Atlantic Ocean. We actually have ancient rock art of hippos and giraffes in this exact area to prove it was full of water and life.
But we must remain strictly neutral here and look closely at the physical evidence. Proponents of the Richat theory point to heavy salt deposits and chaotic sediment layers as proof that a massive ocean tsunami washed over and scoured this structure. However, mainstream archaeology correctly points out one very glaring problem. Absolutely zero human artifacts, bronze tools, or city foundations have ever been excavated at this site. Nothing.
So while the physical resemblance is honestly uncanny, without actual artifacts, it remains just a breathtaking geological wonder.
Let's zoom out a bit. It's time to talk about the unexplored deep and why we might need to reevaluate human history entirely.
As we weigh all 5 of these distinct suspects, we are forced to confront a really uncomfortable truth. We know terrifyingly little about the ancient world, simply because so much of it is currently underwater. Recent deep-sea discoveries are actively rewriting the textbooks as we speak. Just recently in 2025, researchers mapped these massive, circular sonar anomalies spanning 11 square miles off the coast of Cadiz, Spain. We're finding submerged medieval cities in Kyrgyzstan and gorgeous Tartessian stone busts in Spain. These underwater scans are proving that our coastal ancestors were far more advanced and busy than we ever gave them credit for.
There's a saying, the ocean does not make promises, but it keeps everything it takes. The reality is, we have barely even scratched the surface of the world's submerged continental shelves. Think about this. We lost an area of land roughly the size of North America to rising seas at the end of the Ice Age, and almost none of it has been properly, archaeologically surveyed. What Plato described might just be a distorted memory of a very real coastal civilization swallowed by a very real, scientifically verified climate catastrophe. The truth of his story may literally just be sitting in the dark, waiting for us to shine a light on it.
As our sonar technology gets better and better, the ocean is slowly yielding its ancient secrets. So the question is no longer just whether Atlantis existed, but rather, what else is waiting to be found in the deep? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed dark history, mysteries, and conspiracy documentaries, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos.